Alright, so the deck I have been enjoying the most over the last weeks has actually been Tri-Brigade. Now, I've loved this archetype for a longer time for its meta design, but it wasn't until recently that someone, and by someone I mean Lundrity, came up with a creative but also very playable deck list. I sort of put my own spin to it for what I would call a dueling book or remote duel meta, where I expect almost everyone to play Trap Eldritch or any other weird control deck, because usually with these events you can expect people to play something that they have either lying around from a year ago or something that is very affordable. I also call it a dueling book meta adjusted list because when you play dueling book rated, you will face a lot of random decks that you can't really predict when you go into a tournament. Before we go into the specific list, I want to point out just how satisfying it feels to play 16 monsters, 12 spells, 12 traps. Feels nice. It warms my heart to see 20 engine and 20 non-engine cards. Alright. For the deck in general, I believe we can go over this deck list fairly quickly. But I do want to give as much insight, obviously, as I possibly can. For the Tri-Brigades, we max out on every Tri-Brigade monster except for the Keris. The reason we don't want to max out on the Keris is because it isn't a one-card starter that you can either link off or discard like the Fraktall. It requires you to have a different Tri-Brigades or, the Berry Statue, Alpha, Whiptail in your hand to do something. But you still want to play two because in this deck you go through your resources fairly quickly, and not having Tri-Brigade monsters in your deck can be a huge problem in the later turns. So you want to have two, don't want to have three. It's not really a card that you want to draw all the time. 3 tanky is a standard obviously in this deck. It searches Fraktall, but more importantly for me in this version is because it can search a Zodiac monster, which I'll come to in a second. But in general, this card is really nice. You can also send it with the Ancient Warrior's Oath to get a more or less free bounce. It's sort of like with Magician's Souls, where you can draw a free card. You can bounce a card for free from the opponent. So I like this very much. We play 1 Foolish, which is also a pseudo-engine card, I would say, because you can mill the Kit, which can mill the Nerval, which get you a Fraktall, without even using your normal summon. One of the main things I have changed about Lundrity's list also is adding 1 Zodiac monster. I feel like the extra deck was generally underused in this deck, and being able to go for a Trident or a Zeus can sometimes be the perfect option. Like I said, you can search the Zodiac monster with your tanky, which also is very nice, and especially versus boards like Mechabus or Borreload Savage Dragons, where there are just hard negates or Dragoons. A Zodiac monster can be the winner of the match. I have also resolved this on full Subterra boards, which won me the game, or, Eldritch boards. So in general, I just really like this. It doesn't really matter which Zodiac monster you play. If you play the Whiptail, I enjoy it because you can banish a Golden Lord sometimes maybe, but you can also go for the Thoroughblade for more damage. It's really up to you. It doesn't also make the biggest difference. 1 Rendezvous, this card you simply just play to mill it with the Kit in your combo, which I'll show later, to then protect your barrier statue from getting destroyed by battle. Obviously, this is the biggest fear for the deck, is that they somehow run over your barrier statue simply by attacking it, right? You want to prevent it, so you play the Rendezvous, which you can banish in the grave to protect a winged beast or any beast warrior monster. 1 barrier statue, this is basically for your combo only, and then 2 Revolt. Revolt is one of the coolest and most satisfying cards to resolve I've played in a longer time. The reason this is so good is because it becomes a non-target removal during your opponent's turn, which banishes. And it also triggers your Nerval and your Kit during the opponent's turn, because it special summons the materials from the grave or the banished pile, which is nice because usually you will, banish your resources and then you get them back also later for the later turns with the Revolt. You can get them on your opponent's turn, these monsters, and trigger their effects again. So that's really nice. It gives you grind game, it gives you interruption, it gives you resources. This card is basically the best card of the deck. The reason we only play it twice is because it can be very dead in your opening hand, and you can play Trap Trick to basically get this card whenever you need it. Or almost, right? Trap Trick, now that we're here, Trap Trick is one of the most mandatory cards, if that's even a word, for this deck. It gets you into your good non-engine cards, and it gets you into the Revolt, which is one of the best cards in your deck, which you want to see all the time if possible. And then all the other cards in the deck are basically non-engine cards that support your strategy where you want to go into a simplified game state. So oftentimes you want to just very simply do a 1-card combo where you end on the Simorg plus your barrier statue, and then just a bunch of non-engine cards that will help you win the game. And one of these cards is Ice Dragon's Prison. Ice Dragon's Prison is one of the most impactful cards right now because it removes basically two annoying factors of your opponents at once. It removes a monster out of the grave, but it also removes a monster from the field. So versus Dragon Link, but versus the Eldritch deck, or basically what an Alistair deck, a lot of decks suffer from having this card be played against them. I believe it is one of the best trap cards right now, and obviously you have the synergy with Trap Trick, that's really nice. Dynamiscus is also really nice for this deck because you can usually discard a Nerval or a Kit to interrupt your opponent, but also get your own plays going by discarding them, searching something, getting your plays going, getting resources into the grave to be able to trigger your Tri-Brigade effects later. One Imperial Order is nice because right now I feel like this deck in general, even though we play 12 spell cards, once you're in the game, it doesn't really matter if you can still resolve your spell cards. If you can interrupt your opponents, it's way better. And basically this also prevents you from losing to Droplet, Lightning Storm, Dark Ruler no more, and all these annoying cards, right? And just having this auto win button is always nice. 3 Pot are obviously one of the best cards in the game and right now in general. You don't really rely on your extra deck. You can banish 6 sometimes as well. You can banish 3. It's up to you, really your choice, but having this card in general is very, very cool because you can get your Revolt, Trap Trick, Prison, you know, any other non-engine card. And if you're not into your engine, you will almost always see an engine card, and one of the better ones too, because you play Tanky and Fraktall. Called by the Grave is one of the best non-engine cards in the format, I believe, as of right now. It's good during your turn when your opponent goes first, with Dragon Link, for example, on the Heretic Seal. Most decks, you know, tend to play hand traps, as always. So, very good. But it is also a contradicting card in this deck, I would say, to some degree, because on your end phase, you will always have to keep this card to be able to counter a Ash Blossom on the Simorg. You will have to do this in order to be safe so that your barrier statue can hit the field. But if you do it and your opponent doesn't have the Ash, you know, sometimes it can become a little bit of a gamble. And I have definitely lost games because I wanted to Called by the Grave the Ash in the end phase. They didn't have it, and then I didn't have an interruption on their turn, and they just dropletted me, and I lost basically. So while I think this card is very incredible, and it doesn't really make the card worse on its own, it still is something to consider that, you know, kind of contradicting on that part. Cosmic Cyclone, like I said, you want to adjust this, or at least I wanted to adjust this deck to a remote dual meta. And I expect a lot of control decks. This has been nice versus any deck, and also versus Dragon Link. If they don't happen to play the Nocto Vision Dragon, which protects this card, protects their Tidying face down, this card is also super good versus that deck. And going first, obviously, always very good versus Boots, Hector Launch, the World Legacy Guard Dragon, and you know, versus any trap deck, very, very nice. And then 3 Alpha. 3 Alpha is interesting because, you know, it was always one of the cards that people were pretty skeptical towards, I would say, and Pancratops was always a better option. For this deck specifically, you do have the synergy with the Tri-Brigade monsters. So it's a beast monster, you can discard it with the Keris, you can banish it with all their effects from the grave. And also for this deck, because it is a deck that likes to play in a simplified game state, Alpha is one of the cards that generates you card advantage very easily, right? It's not one of these cards, going second cards, like Droplet, that requires you to get rid of your own cards to negate your opponent's cards, and then you need a very, very explosive engine like Dino to be able to OTK your opponent or set up a huge board with, you know, 1 to 2 cards. This deck can't really do that. You can only set up like 1 interruption, maybe 2 interruptions for the opponent's turn. So you want a card that you can play every turn again. And that's why I like the Alpha as well. You can special it, bounce it back to the hand, and then special it again, or they negate it, and you can just go into the battle phase, attack. It's a nice card to trade 1-for-1s with your opponent. And that's what I need for this deck usually. For the extra deck, all the Tri-Brigades we play once, but at the moment we play twice. Because you need this card, you go into it often with the Revolt. But these are not the cards that you usually make a lot. So the Baron Blossom you make sometimes if you want to link climb to some degree. But the Link 3 you rarely ever make. Sometimes you make it to go into your access code talker for a Link 3. But other than that, I don't really see too many applications for this card. Its effect is not really the best. Omen banishes the card on target, like I said. One of the best cards, coolest artwork as well. Love it. Link Kuribo, you can link your Nerval for it, so that's nice. You can also make this to protect your barrier statue from getting destroyed by battle. Almirage is only there pretty much to be able to link your kid away so you can get your place going. The Oath is a nice interruption during your opponent's turn. The Conductor you need for the first turn combo, which I'll show in a second. Simorg for your combo. The card that literally I cannot pronounce the name of, but I would just call it Doom Eagle, right? The Doom Eagle is a nice option sometimes if your opponent, if you want to interrupt your opponent when they play a graveyard relying deck. It's very nice, but also being able to OTK with this card fairly easily for a 4800 beater. It's just very nice. Access code talker. You can make this so easily with this deck. Just play a Tri-Brigade, make a Link 3, and go into this card. And then all the Zodiac monsters as well as Zeus. And then for the side deck, this side deck is obviously adjustable, but I think mandatory is the anti-spell right now. Anti-spell super good, like I said, versus Droplet, Lightning Storm, Dark Ruler. Post-siding, incredibly good. Judgment, also always nice against those cards. And then evenly match versus the Trap matchup, or against any trap deck basically. And Nibiru and Kaijus versus, you can still obviously face combo in this format. It's not very unlikely, especially if you play at a more competitive locals or maybe even an extravaganza or something. And Nibiru is one of the hand traps that you can play as a standalone hand trap as well, more so than any other hand trap, I feel like. The following combo is the one you're gonna try to do every single game. I mean, if you want to call it a combo, it's not really too huge, but it's what you're going to try to do every single game. You're going to discard Fraktall, 2-mil Nerval, which is going to add a Tri-Brigade monster. You can add Kit and normal Kit to banish 2 Tri-Brigades, special summoning the Harpy Conductor. Harpy Conductor is a winged beast monster, which we need for Simorg, and Simorg is obviously the card that gets us to the barrier statue. Kit's effect when it goes to the grave is you can mill a Tri-Brigade card. You're going to mill the Rendezvous, and then in the end phase you're going to special summon the barrier statue, and on your opponent's turn, if they try to destroy the barrier statue, you can banish the Rendezvous. That was a bit of a longer video for a deck discussion. If you enjoy playing a control deck that first simplifies the game state to then, overwhelm your opponent with an unpredictable OTK, this deck might very well be for you. For me personally, it was just a great mix-up to your normal control deck, I would say. Once again, want to give a big shout out to Lundrity for innovating this archetype, this deck. And other than that, I hope you loved it, and I'll see you in the next one.